Have you ever felt like your life is stuck? Like no matter how hard you try, nothing changes? This is the story of David, a man who once lived in complete failure. A man who believed that the world was unfair, that success was for others, and that nothing good would ever happen to him. But everything changed when he discovered one powerful truth. Backhand index pointing right, when you change your mindset, you change your life. So listen carefully, because David's story might sound very much like yours. And by the end you will see that if he could change his life, so can you. David was 28 years old, living in a small rented room on the edge of the city. His clothes were old, his shoes had holes, and his wallet was always empty. Every morning he woke up with a heavy sigh. His first thought was always the same. Why is my life so hard? Why does nothing good ever happen to me? He worked at a warehouse, carrying heavy boxes for little pay. At the end of each month, the money disappeared on rent, food, and debts. Sometimes he skipped meals just to save a few coins. Sometimes he stared at the ceiling at night, wondering why others seemed to succeed while he remained stuck in poverty. But what hurt him the most was his mindset. He believed he was unlucky. He believed he was born poor and would die poor. He believed life was against him. And because he believed these things, he never tried to do better. When his friends invited him to learn a new skill, he said, "What's the point? I'll just fail." When his cousin suggested starting a small business, he replied, "I don't have money. I don't have talent. I don't have connections." Excuses became his daily food. Negativity became his language. Hopelessness became his identity. David was alive, but he wasn't living. One rainy evening, after another long day at the warehouse, David sat under a broken bus stop. His jacket was wet, his shoes muddy, and his face tired. Next to him sat an old man. His clothes were simple, yet his face carried peace, as if he knew something about life that David didn't. The old man looked at David and said, "You look troubled, young man." David gave a bitter laugh. "Troubled? My life is a failure. I work hard, but I'm still poor. Nothing ever works for me." The old man nodded slowly. "Tell me," he asked, "what do you think about all day?" David frowned. "What do I think about? I think about how unlucky I am. I think about how unfair life is. I think about how others succeed while I suffer." The old man smiled gently and said words that David would never forget. "And that is why your life is the way it is. Because your thoughts create your world. Change your mindset and you will change your life." David was shocked. "What do you mean? I can't just think myself rich." The old man leaned closer. "Your thoughts become your beliefs. Your beliefs guide your actions. And your actions shape your results. If you think like a failure, you will act like a failure, and your life will remain failure. But if you change your mindset, you will change the way you act. And when you act differently, your life will follow." Those words burned into David's heart. It sounded too simple yet too powerful. Before leaving, the old man placed his hand on David's shoulder and said, "Son, stop telling yourself you can't. Start telling yourself you can. Feed your mind with possibility, and watch your life transform." Then he walked away, disappearing into the rain. David sat there trembling. It was the first time anyone had told him that his mind was the key to his life. The next morning, David woke up and remembered the old man's words. Change your mindset, change your life. He stood in front of the cracked mirror in his room and, for the first time, spoke to himself differently. "I am not a failure," he whispered. "I can learn. I can grow. I can change my life." At first it felt silly. His old voice of doubt shouted louder, "Stop lying to yourself. You'll always be poor." But David forced himself to keep repeating the positive words. Day after day he spoke life into himself. Slowly something strange happened. When he thought better, he felt better. When he felt better, he worked better. And when he worked better, small opportunities began to appear. At the warehouse, instead of complaining, he started working with more focus. His supervisor noticed his change of attitude and gave him more responsibility. One day, David saw a free evening class advertised on a poster, "Learn basic computer skills." Normally he would have said, "That's not for me." But this time he remembered the old man's words. And he said to himself, "Why not? I can learn. I can grow. I can change." That night he joined the class. It was hard at first. His hands trembled on the keyboard, but for the first time in years he felt hope. David attended the evening computer class every night after work. At first, his eyes burned with tiredness, his back ached, and his hands wanted to give up. But each time he felt like quitting, he whispered the words he had learned. Backhand index pointing right, "I can learn. I can grow. I can change." The teacher, a kind woman named Mrs. Clara, noticed his determination. While others laughed at his mistakes, David stayed behind after class to practice. Soon he could type faster, search the internet, and even make simple spreadsheets. For the first time, David realized something powerful. He was not stupid. He was not helpless. He only needed to believe in his ability to grow. One evening as class ended, Mrs. Clara said to him, "David, I like your spirit. Have you ever thought of using your skills for extra income?" David blinked. "Me? Extra income? How?" She smiled. "There are small businesses around the city that need help with typing, simple computer work, and printing documents. With your attitude you could help them and earn from it." The idea lit a fire in David's heart. That night, instead of lying in bed complaining, he wrote in his old notebook, "Offer typing services. Help businesses with simple documents. Save every coin I earn." It wasn't much, but for David, it was the start of a dream. A week later, David walked into a small stationery shop and offered to type documents for customers. At first, the owner was doubtful. But when David showed his new skills, the man allowed him to help. David's first client was a young student who needed an assignment typed. The pay was small, just enough for a meal, but when David received those coins in his hand, his heart swelled with pride. For the first time in his life, he had earned money not from heavy labor but from using his mind. He whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning." Each evening after the warehouse job, he went to the shop. Slowly more people came. He typed letters, created resumes, and helped students. Every little job improved his skill and added to his savings. David felt alive. He had discovered a secret. Backhand index pointing right. When your mindset changes, you start to see opportunities that were always around you. But life is never a straight road. 1 month later, the warehouse where David worked announced staff cuts. His name was on the list. In one moment, his main source of income was gone. Fear and doubt returned like dark clouds. What if I can't survive? What if this typing job fails? What if I end up on the streets? That night, David almost gave up. He sat in his room, staring at the ceiling with tears burning in his eyes. But then he remembered the old man's words. "Your thoughts create your world. Change your mindset and you will change your life." So he took a deep breath and said aloud, "No, I will not give up. Losing my job is not the end, it is a chance for a new beginning." The next morning, instead of crying at home, David walked around the city, visiting small shops, offices, and schools. He introduced himself and offered his services. Some rejected him. Some ignored him. But a few said yes. Within 2 weeks, he had 3 regular clients who paid him to prepare documents every week. David realized something. Backhand index pointing right. When you stop thinking like a victim and start thinking like a creator, doors begin to open. Months passed. David's little typing side job grew into a small business. He bought a second-hand laptop from his savings and worked late into the night, creating flyers, resumes, and simple business cards. He was no longer the hopeless warehouse worker. He was becoming an entrepreneur. One day, a school principal asked him to help with exam papers. The job was big and the payment was more than David had ever seen at once. When he received the money, he held it close and whispered with tears, "Thank you, thank you." But deep inside he knew it wasn't luck. It was the power of a changed mindset. With new confidence, David began reading books about business and success. Every morning he spent 15 minutes repeating affirmations. "I am capable. I am growing. I am building a better life." At first he felt strange. But slowly these words rewired his brain. He learned that wealth is not about money, it is about mindset. He learned that failure is not the end, it is a teacher. He learned that the greatest power in life is belief. And as his mind grew, so did his business. He rented a tiny shop with 2 computers. He hired a young student to help him. Soon, people around the city knew his place as the printing and typing center. David had moved from hopelessness to purpose. From excuses to action. From poverty to progress. All because he chose to change the way he thought. One bright morning, as David stood in front of his small shop, arranging papers, he saw a familiar figure walking slowly across the street. It was the old man from the bus stop. The one who had planted the seed of change in his life. David's heart raced. He ran across the street and grabbed the old man's hands with tears in his eyes. "Sir, do you remember me? Months ago you told me that if I change my mindset I will change my life. Look around you. I am no longer a beggar of life. I am building something. All because of your words." The old man smiled warmly. "I told you the truth, son. And you believed it. That is why your life is different now. Remember this, your journey has just begun. Never stop feeding your mind with positivity. Never stop believing in yourself. David hugged him tightly. In that moment he realized something deep. Backhand index pointing right, a single thought, a single belief, can change the entire direction of a person's life. As David's small shop continued to grow, something unexpected happened. The people who once looked down on him began to respect him. The neighbors who used to call him the poor warehouse boy now came to him for help with documents and business cards. Even his relatives who had mocked him for being jobless started saying, "David is smart. David is doing well." For the first time in his life, David felt proud. Not because of the money, though he was earning more than ever before, but because he had proven to himself that he could rise. One evening, as he closed his shop, he looked at his reflection in the glass door and whispered, "It was never the world that was against me. It was my own mindset." But life always tests those who are growing. After 1 year of running his shop, a bigger printing company opened just a few streets away. Their machines were faster, their posters brighter, and their prices lower. Many of David's customers began to go there instead. His income dropped. Fear returned. For a moment, David felt the old voice whisper again. "See? You are not good enough. You will fail again. You will go back to poverty." But this time David knew the truth. He stood firm and said to himself, "No, I will not think like a victim. I will think like a creator." Instead of competing with the big company in the same way, he asked himself, backhand index pointing right, what unique value can I offer that they cannot? So he decided to focus on personal service. While the big company treated customers like numbers, David treated each one like family. He gave advice, helped students with assignments, guided job seekers on resumes, and supported small businesses with ideas. Slowly word spread again. People said, "The big shop is cheap, but David cares. With him you feel important." And once again his business grew, not because of machines but because of mindset. As his income increased, David remembered the days when he had nothing. He remembered skipping meals, borrowing coins, and sitting hopeless under the rain. So he made a decision. Every month he would help at least one person in need. Sometimes he gave free typing services to poor students. Sometimes he donated part of his profit to feed hungry children. Sometimes he simply sat with struggling young men and told them the same words he had once heard. Backhand index pointing right, change your mindset, change your life. One evening, a boy named Samuel came to his shop. His shoes were torn, his eyes filled with shame. He asked David for a job. David looked at him and saw his old self. Instead of rejecting him, David said, "Come tomorrow. I will teach you how to type. You don't need to pay me. You only need to believe that you can change." That boy later became one of his best workers. David realized another truth. Backhand index pointing right, when you rise, don't rise alone. Lift others with you. Years passed. David's little shop grew into a small company. He now had 3 branches across the city with computers, printers, and several employees. He no longer lived in a tiny rented room. He moved into a decent home. He dressed well, walked with confidence, and spoke with wisdom. But the greatest transformation was not outside, it was inside. The man who once thought he was cursed now believed he was blessed. The man who once gave excuses now created opportunities. The man who once felt like a victim now lived as a victor. And every time he faced a new challenge, he remembered the words of the old man. Your thoughts create your world. Change your mindset and you will change your life. One day, David was invited to give a talk at a youth seminar. The hall was filled with young men and women who were searching for hope. As he stood on the stage, he saw himself in their faces, the same fear, the same doubts, the same hopelessness. He began with a smile and said, "Many years ago I was just like you. Poor, broken, and hopeless. I believed that nothing good would ever happen to me. But one day a wise old man told me something that changed my life. He said, 'Your thoughts create your world. Change your mindset and you will change your life.' And from that day everything changed." The hall was silent. Every ear was listening. David continued, "Friends, I am living proof that success does not start with money or talent or connections. It starts with the mind. If you think you are beaten, you are. If you think you are weak, you are. But if you think you can rise, you will. I was once a warehouse worker with nothing. Today I own businesses, employ people, and live a life of meaning. Not because the world changed, but because I changed my mindset." Thunderous applause filled the hall. Tears rolled down faces. For many of them, that speech became the seed of change, just like the old man's words had once been for David. Years later, David became known not only as a successful businessman but also as a mentor, speaker, and guide for others. But in his heart, he never forgot the rainy evening at the bus stop. He never forgot the stranger who gave him a gift more valuable than gold, the gift of a new mindset. And so, whenever anyone asked him the secret of his success, he always said the same words. Backhand index pointing right, change your mindset, change your life. Because that was the truth. The truth that turned a hopeless man into a man of hope. The truth that turned poverty into prosperity. The truth that could turn anyone's life, including yours, into something greater. So, dear listener, remember David's story. Remember that your current situation is not your final destination. Remember that the power to change your life is already inside you. It begins with your thoughts. If you think small, you will live small. If you think hopeless, you will live hopeless. But if you think big, if you think possible, if you think growth, your life will rise. Never forget. Change your mindset, change your life.